Antonio Cerdan. So you have a really nice little bit of animation here about a mime reading a book. And then he finds a little ball and he starts playing with the ball. And I know you're going to set this all to music. You're still looking for a piece of music, but you want to get started with some of the posing ideas for telling this little story. So he loses the ball. He swallows it. He's trying to shoot it away, and he's running from it. It's attacking him. That's cute. It's clever. Clever little scene. So it's interesting to be doing a animation that's all pantomime. Everything. This is a very good exercise. It's very challenging. The biggest challenge you're going to have is making sure that everything is simple and clear, right? Simple and clear. You want it appealing. This is a really appealing kind of thing to do in terms of all the posing, all the gestures, the acting, the timing of everything. But your appeal, you can only reach appeal if you first have simplicity and clarity. If it's not simple, it's confusing. If it's not clear, you're not quite sure what his pose means, then there's no appeal. Those two things kill appeal if you don't have them. So strive first and foremost for simplicity and clarity in your posing, and then in all the beats of your action that are building up the scenario. Because when you're doing something, especially with this, where he's dealing with some imaginary objects, like he's reading a book and then he's picking up a ball and playing with this ball, everything has to be clear, because the audience will get confused so easily if it's not spelled out correctly, if it's not demonstrated as such. And one pose isn't necessarily going to help you do that. It's usually an action or a series of actions that helps you to understand what he's doing. So let's get into this. Let's start looking at the posing first. So in this first bit, he's reading a book. It's not super clear. Perhaps it's because you're assuming that the audience knows what those poses mean. Even though you know what it is in your head, it's not clear for the audience. So you might want to have an action where he picks up the book and he looks around, he opens the book, and then maybe he licks his thumb and then opens to a page first. So he's rifling through a page. So that action tells the audience right away, hey, this is he's reading a book. That's what he's doing here. But I know this is your real first pass, so I'm just throwing those things out there just so you know, and that I can make this more instructive. But I'm just going to assume some things about this just so that it's a good video. So posing wise, if he's holding a book, I would think you want to make sure that you get this bend in the wrist. Maybe exaggerate that a bit. Why can't I do this? There we go. Maybe make sure you have that angle, because that helps. And the hands, the fingers themselves aren't really selling to me that this imaginary thing in there is a book, because if I were to draw the book, let's say, and it might even be helpful for you to draw the book in the animation and then get rid of it for your roughs. For me, I would want to make it even more clear. So I would assume, let's say there's a spine for the book there, and this is facing him more forward, and this one is perhaps more up. right? That's what I was doing with that book. And so now what I want to do is make sure the hand is working with that. And you know, we don't have to get into details of those things, but your basic gesture of your hand is going to be a bit different with that, right? Because this is more of a side view, right? If we put the fingers in there, and this one is more, maybe there'd be a split between one of them there as he's doing that to read that book. So I'm going to leave the book in there for now. But you could use any other posture you wanted to, but the idea is just to get that clear. And the other thing that might help it, he's got his head tilted back here, right? So if he's got his head tilted back, I want to feel that a little bit stronger that he's looking down. But even so, I don't have a clear imaginary eye line there that makes him look like he's reading that book. So I might consider pulling his head back a little bit, perhaps, and make sure your line of action is clear. Yeah, he's got that funky neck. And I might even, I don't know if I could do that or not, but I would say, woo, what happened? This might be a little bit clearer because he's perpendicular at least to the book, and you get a sense of him reading more than if he's reading like this. Is kind of awkward to read like that. And let's push it even more. If I got rid of all this, let's just start over with the pose. I mean, in reality, what would be even clearer, just in simple shapes, is if your line of action is sort of going around that book and everything is driving him into that, right? So that's your sense of a line of action. And he's perhaps leaning into the book maybe even more. Let's get rid of this. Oh. And get his eyes closer. Because sometimes when people are really fixated in attending a book, reading a book, they're going to be more like that, right? The book's going to be like right in their face. So do everything you can to make it clear and strong. The stronger in this kind of thing, the better. And you really have to spell it out. If you watch Chaplin or Keaton, they do things to the extreme in order that you understand just from their silhouette that they are working. And then, you know, this becomes a little more clear. So now he's attentive to that, right? So you can see the strength here, just from those scribbles of those curves. Now it's clear. Get those hands, right? The hands, the curvature of the hands are helping, especially on this side. Maybe not so much on this side. That's what he's doing. So just get him, and the more you can do that curve, line of action, to thrust him leaning into that book, give him that sense of that lean, it's going to be better, right? So that's going to be stronger than this. But this is a good starting phase. I mean, when you start first, you have to recognize in animation that these poses that you're first doing, these are just anchor points. These are just ideas of where you need to go in the storytelling. And then, especially in something like this, where you're going to be doing a lot more straight ahead animation, they're just anchor points to sort of guide you to get to that place, and then you're going to toss them aside. It's not losing a drawing. It's you're sort of working your beats out first, and then you're going to go and hit them in a different way as you're organically working into them and out of them. And the challenge you're going to have with something like this, which is a cool challenge, is that you're not just hitting a pose. You're going into a series of poses or an action that's defined by quite a number of poses, so that you're living in those poses, which is what mimes do. They live in these moments of business, and even when they're broken down into segments in order to be clear. So you have to think in terms of that. So all your little points, and this is what I said in one of my previous videos, if I just give you the ping pong principle, you've got a pose here, pose here, pose here, pose here on a timeline. Let's say that's time, moving that way. What you've done is sort of laid out these poses, this is what you have to do. This is your first starting point. But what you don't do next is sort of move into this, and then move into that, and then move into that, and then move into that. Even if you have a hold, you hold on that, and then you move in out of that, because this gives you that sense of a ping pong effect, and it doesn't really help with any kind of organic energy that you want to have in something like this. So, So like I said, generally the audience doesn't see anything more than 3 to 4. It can't register more than 4 frames at a time. So anything, let's say this is a 4-frame threshold on both sides, right? Anything you're hitting that's less than 4 frames is going to feel like you're ping-ponging off it, and you're not really going to see it. Just like when you're trying to watch a ping pong game and you're looking for that ball to hit the table, it's there in a flash and then it's gone. And this is how a lot of animators approach their animation. They do this ping pong, and so effectively the only thing the audience really sees is this little middle area. So all those beautiful extreme drawings that you have made and put your time into that are supposed to be selling the meat of the story, it's gone. It's effectively bye-bye, right? Just like that. All those are disappeared because you didn't spend enough time in those poses to live there for it to register. So that's why I say what you need to do is this. See if we can get rid of all this quickly. So what you have to think about now is you've got a bunch of poses here where you're living in, and then you're going to have a bunch of poses here that you're living in, and then a bunch of poses here that you're living in. And usually you're going to do more extreme poses, right? And then that pose that you originally had is going to go because it was only there to serve a certain purpose, right? So you have like, you're animating into this pose here. So you've got these poses here, these here, these define an action, these define an action, these define an action. You might have some posing in between here that's a little bit different to get you from place to place. But then when you're coming to this pose that you've spent so much time defining, that's crucial, you might not even hit that pose exactly. You're heading there, but once you get there, your business actually takes you further than where it was right here. So it's more extreme, and then you're working around it, right? So this just becomes a guiding post to help you know where to go on the roadmap, but the actual roads that you're taking might be completely different once you get there. Same thing here. You might hit here. In fact, in this one, you might get up close to it and then delay, do a little hesitation or something, and then all your business is in a different action over there. So all that's to say is that's how I think you need to. This is how I think about animation. I'm not. These poses are these first initial poses are just sort of to help me get there, and that's why they're very rough. You work very rough at this stage so that you can change this, and this all becomes modifying. So you start playing this, and you go, it's not really quite working in here like this. So I want to Let me erase that. And so let me start doing some different poses. So you do some different, and you push it. You push it even further than you originally had to see where it might take you. And then you might come back, right? So you come into whatever that business is in there. And that way, you know that originally you were working in this, the audience was only seeing this area because you were ping-ponging into these. Now they're seeing the whole thing. Now you're guiding their eye and you're helping them with this. So this is how you need to think about these things here. So anyhow, let me get rid of those. A bunch of stuff here that I don't need. So here he does a paper. I think that might be a little too strong, Antonio. That he would go like that. Maybe he would be, at least in pantomime, if he's like, take the page and clearly move it over to this other side. So he's being a little more gentle with the book, right? And then here as well, I would say your posing could be a little stronger in terms of him holding on the book, because if I'm imagining a book in his hand, let's say like that, I'm not sure what's holding it up. So I'd work on the posture of the hands. Hands are incredibly difficult. Important, because they convey so much information. You need to spend as much time on your hands as you do your facial expressions and the rest of the pose, because they themselves, with all their fingers, you got five digits plus the wrist and how it's tilted and all these rotations. They all can communicate together a really strong pose. So he's holding a book. So he would be, if you're holding a book with one hand, your spine, right? The spine of the book is like this, and you're holding it open. Here, let me do it this hand. The book is open like this, and you got the thumb holding one side, and the hand holding the other. So I would exaggerate that, and just work with mitts. You don't have to deal with the fingers until you need a finger. So I would think his thumb, would be over here like this, and his fingers, wanted to do that. Now you can imagine that there's a book, perhaps, in his hand there a little more. Again, I would want to see a little more attitude for him. It's hard with that neck the kind of neck you've got, but draw longer lines in general, so you're drawing through things rather than piecing together little components that are attached together. If you draw longer lines, it feels more like an organic unit. So again, I would want his head perhaps leaning in more into that book, like he's really paying a lot of attention to that, right? And his eye, is down there. And then anything you obscure the face with a hand, like that kind of thing where he's thinking. You're going to want to simplify it and spend a lot of time figuring out how to make that really cool. So I would probably bring him up a little bit more with the neck and his hand. This arm would then come out to justify the length of this, and so his arm would be like this, so it's foreshortened here, this forearm, so that's a foreshortened, so you're bringing that arm down in there to help convey. And even that, with that part of the arm coming and the curve going up, it's directing us. You have to use a lot of these direction kind of things. This curve kind of coming over, see if you can work it with the nose so that it feels like there's pointing. The eye line itself, where he's looking, is going to draw our attention to it. Anything perpendicular to it or close to perpendicular will help with that. Even the fingers, you could stick a little pinky out here, and that would help draw our attention to the book and strengthen that posture. So you can see at this point, I'm thinking through everything. I'm not really nailing any cool poses, or I'm trying to get to some cool poses, but I'm not interested in the drawing of it right at this point. I'm trying to get the story underneath. I'm trying to focus on what elements are going to make this a really strong pose. This is the undergirdings, right? So lean forward. Now you could, if you got into this and it was clear in your action that you wanted to tip the head back, like he's looking at it, and then he tips it back and he does some sort of little action there, that's great. That works fine. But just as it is, it feels, this is sort of clumsy and it's getting in the way just because of the way it's all designed. It's confusing. So that's what I mean. The clarity isn't there. The simplicity isn't there in that pose. I'd want to push it a little bit more. Get that hand up, so that it feels like it's there. Okay, so that's what I had done. That there. So now we cut to a wide shot, and I know you're just posing this out right now. You're not really animating it, but I'm just thinking ahead for you. Now this is kind of an interesting thing, and I love your character. It reminds me a lot like Olive Oil. He's got that kind of loosey, spaghetti-like posture and appendages that don't really have arms and things. I would want you to exaggerate that a little bit more, like you did here with the feet, which is kind of cool. You got this one leg wrapped around the other leg, which is very interesting. That makes this really special, and it draws my attention. What's this character going to do? You have no expectation. He's going to play in this rubber hose world of animation, which is something fascinating. Now, he does have a nice posture. I can see you're trying to get to a posture, but it feels like also you're trying to get into that book again. And I'm just looking, like, for instance, if I was to fill this all in as a silhouette, what's that going to look like? Is it going to be strong? I don't know if this is really that helpful, but at this stage. You're not really quite sure, I think, if you filled it in like a silhouette, what it would be doing. This is such an extreme thing. These twists here, I would want to see him get into that pose. So maybe what you could do between the cuts is that he sort of shifts his balance, and then like he's going to cross his legs, like his legs were apart, and now he's going to cross them, and so then we see him cross his legs here into this position, which would be very cool. That would be cool. So what I'm going to think about here in this pose is can I still maintain something of that posture that you have, but get rid of it. I might reverse that. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. Woo, it's cool. Here again, I would maybe not go behind him again. I would want to keep him just as a cut back, straight cut back, jump cut, hand up in the way that's gonna make it look like he's reading that book. Posture here. So this hand would be out. This arm would be out. This one would be down more on this, right? So this is the foreground arm. I would want to see his nose, just so I have that clarity again, that eye line, the sense of the book being there. I think that would work. Let me just try. So I got that pose here. Let me see if your way, this, because I can understand he's trying to maintain good posture while he's doing this. So let's see what we might be able to work out here. That might work. But you can see it sort of breaks that clarity of him. And already I'm feeling like, so this is the foreground with this arm down rather than what you have. And then the further one out is going to be out more because it's the one holding up the book, right? Um, I just think this one is stronger than this one, right? This might, now again, this is your basic. Now you could have him as a different secondary pose, as if he's moving into something, or shifting his weight, or something else in that business of this action. But to me, in terms of this is a confusing read. This is an instantaneous read. This one I get right away, and I think it's a stronger pose for you. See, now this is where it works. So he's reaching back. Now I would probably push it even further. So now he's getting interesting, and you want to shift him even more, because this is a huge shift for him to do that. And those kinds of things work really nice when you're shifting action from one curve to another. Now we have a reason to shift back in this pose, and then, here perhaps he could, if he's leaning back, and we want to put some pressure on that hand. So he's leaning back, and maybe his eyes now are a bit more up. His nose is a bit more up, but I didn't do that quite right. Oops. And now he's looking at that, the thing, and maybe the hand is up even further. It might even be out more. Instead of keeping it there, maybe he's putting it out more, trying to adjust his eyes differently. I don't know. And keep, since he's rubber hosey, I would avoid these sharp angles. If you have those sharp angles, here it keeps him sort of in character to have those rubber hose kind of elbows and joints. And we want to see his face. This is another thing. Here he's not really playing to camera, right? He's not playing to the camera. Here he's more playing to the camera when we're seeing his face. That's why, when you're just make this clear. You always need, whenever you're going to break that, you're going to be seeing the 3/4 back, 3/4 behind of a character. Whatever is here has to be even clearer and stronger. So, if I was to have him do that, let's say it was a 3/4, we're just seeing the side of his face, there's his ear, then this book would have to be really apparent, right? Really apparent. So you'd want to subordinate everything and guide everything up to that book being in the air, and perhaps being a little precarious. Maybe it's a little more vertical now that he's holding it in that position, right? So, but again, that's something hard to communicate in mime. So you want to make your problems easier. So you should think about not doing some of those poses that are going to be harder to communicate, like that. It's nice that he's tapping his foot. Nice squash there. I think you could push it, especially since he is such a rubbery character. The elbow, the shoulder going up, I might bring that up more. You can bring his head down even further. Bring up the other elbow. Hand could go up more. I like that. That's a nice little delicate pose you got going with that hand there. So this is where the ping pong effect works for you, where you hit these extremes and you're only there for a frame or two, and the audience feels it. They don't see it. They're not registering how awkward it would be to look at something like that, right? So with his arms up, so those are places where the ping pong works, but not when you're trying to deliver a story in a pose. And so now here he goes. He's looking. And I gotta get some more white. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Cancel. this back so I can. All right. All right. So here you're posing could be stronger if you're thinking more in longer lines. Think in longer lines. You're dominating movement here. He's looking, and make sure everything else is subordinate to those longer lines. So here the elbow is such an extreme angle there that I'm not quite sure what his point is to be out, because it's drawing so much attention to itself. So I would want to. So he's looking for something. So I would get that out of the way because it's ruining the clarity. And maybe I'd bring his hand over here so that this becomes the most important thing. Yeah, you can have this elbow go, this shoulder going up. That sort of helps it. But again, I watch those angles so that you're not right. So that way, the main thrust of the movement is this long line here, and then it sort of follows. It continues blankly because that's where he's looking, right? So he's looking to his point of look. This is nice. I mean, this is an interesting pose, and I like the extremity of it, how extreme it is. Let's just start with the head. So he's looking down, right? His legs are still going to be in that. I would want to clear as much away from this to help this sense of him. You want these to help point down. Right now, because they're so low and they're so close to his face, and it's such an extreme W kind of situation, it feels like it's cluttered. So I'd want to, I would keep this arm out and up. I wouldn't bring it down so much. And this one, you know, I might just, I don't know, I might keep it up away, because then now everything's pointing, so he's looking down. It's helping that pose. Same here. You'd want to work out that pose a little bit more. Now he gets up to take a look, because he's found something, right? So now he's up and he's clapping because he found something. All right. So nice placement there. I would want, again, clear, simple lines. He's a rubbery character, rubber hose kind of character. Get him up there and get his silhouettes working nice and strong, right? I would get this clap up higher, maybe, and maybe angle it up a little bit more so it's not so straight up and down. Right? So you want everything to sort of point us back down like this. Even this is helping continue us, bring us that down. Looking at that thing. That's what mimes do. They use their entire bodies. They use everything to help guide the audience's eye. And what I might want to do is just sort of imagine that ball would be there. And it's probably very helpful as you're animating to do that. Put the ball in there so that you know exactly where you're supposed to be looking, and then you get rid of it later. So he's going to go down and reach for it. So he picks it up, and you want to be very articulate in how you pick it up. Lots of gestures. So he goes down, maybe his hand begins, as he's coming down, his hand is up. I don't know, he's going down with a grab, you know, like a, and then he's going to grab it. And however you want to do that with the little pinky up, you might want to exaggerate that. Make sure that when you do this, you're not twinning too much, right? So he grabs. Because right here, you're a bit of a twin, a lot of twin there, so you don't want to do that. And then when you lift, he's going to overshoot in terms of his palm, perhaps, and then his fingers are going to squeeze together, and his elbow is going to break, right, as he lifts. Right? Beep. And the imaginary ball in there like that, something like that. So you can see it's just the rhythms of how you get those things in here. Pulls it up. So now he goes into this pose where he's looking at it. Where's he heading? He's going to show it to us. So I would want it a little more on display. So it's a little too low. I would want him holding it up like it's a really big prize that he wants everybody to make sure that they're seeing it. So he's got that ball. That he wants us to see. And you got some nice lines here. I think those are working nicely. And this is a nice little gesture. I might bring it up a little higher. Why? I can't tell you. It's just my gut feeling. But, you know, use your gut feeling, which obviously is different. But I'm going to be following my gut on things like that. So this way, you're getting a sense of things still helping to move us into that, to look at that, right? So this is a nice bit that you're getting the ball right above him. Again, I would work very carefully on the hands, because especially on a close-up like this. I'm not sure I would put his... I would still want his feet to be a little more, not so straight together there. So his head's going to be there. But you want the hands also to help convey a balance here, right? This one's pointing, so this one's going to be stronger. And you have to pull it perhaps further away in order for that finger to have the real estate it needs to do what you want. Bring it up. And then try to find places where you can do that loopy kind of rubber hose stuff for him. And it's nice that you have these eyes right there, but make sure that you're helping yourself here so that the eyes are also, their shapes are helping to point us down to that thing. And in fact, I might cheat it just a little bit with a little cock on the eyes themselves. So he's going to throw it in the air, which is all nice. I would in this section here really go with the loopy olive oil, no joints kind of animation. He's like an octopus. His hands are like arms are like the octopuses here. Work on those S curves, right? And keep everything really fluid. Even here, I wouldn't break that joint so much. I would have it more like a fluid S-curve. Keep those lines, those loopy lines together. Find a way for them. I think in the animation, it's going to look really nice. Same here. It's nice that you've got this hand ready to jump. It's like he's thinking, he knows, I feel it. He knows where it's going to head. So he's throwing this arm up. And you got that S-curve starting. Don't lose that S-curve. Make sure it's strong in your pose. All those curves that you can put in there. And then over here, he's subordinating this hand. This hand is coming down. I might even push down a little bit further just to exaggerate it and get it out of the way. And you've got this hand coming up. Since you had such a great poise in the other one, I'd want to keep that poise in that hand as if it's ready to catch it. That whole time, it's ready to catch. And here I might even break into an S-curve on that pose. And then he catches it. Doink! Which is a nice pose. And again. And as he's doing this, you know, it's just him bouncing this thing around. Think of some rubber hose way of doing it with, like you had the leg twirling around the other one. Something really cool in this section, and keep that fluidly rubber hosey kind of stuff going on here. Even in his legs, when he's supporting himself, olive oil. Think olive oil. Not EVO, the thing you cook with. I mean, olive oil, the Popeye's girlfriend. And keep that head in the same way. So he throws it up. We cut to a different shot where it's not clear what's happening here. I'm thinking that he's trying to get out of the way of it, and it falls to the ground. Oh no, I'm sorry. He's doing hacky sack. So here I might have him really do something funky with the hacky sack kind of feeling. Get that leg up and out of there. Get this leg out so that this one feels like he's got that hacky sack kind of feel, but as a rubber hose character. See, that feels funny. Even that drawing, I can tell the movie's making. Once you get it in a movement, it'll work really nice. Break out of the normalcy of your typical character. You got a really fun character here. Maybe you can go back on itself. Really, there's like it's compound S curve on his leg. That's I'm just goofing around here, seeing just exploring what's the possibilities here for these kinds of Maybe his arm here could do a loop-de-loo. I don't know. I'm just... Strengthen your pose. Work on your balance as well. Like, one thing to think about on a pose like this is you could... If I pushed it, let's push it. Let's just go ahead and push one. So his foot's here. He's really pushing out. His head is more like this. And he's got his foot there. Yeah, I'm not liking that part of it. I'm wanting to get it out and then maybe up like that. No, maybe not. I don't know. Again, bend those bones. He's got rubber bones kind of thing. And I would... When you do a straight arm like this, it's a very, very strong gesture. And it means certain things in certain places, but when it's so strong, it's counterbalancing something or preparing to stop or something. I try to avoid that kind of a pose, just because it is so strong and specific to a feeling. So I would want to break it up either with an S curve. Yeah, maybe this one was better, like that. And so now here he's doing this. Now you've got what I think is real fun here, making him do this. And this, you're not just sticking one pose. His whole body should be going back and forth in this section here. Keep that line of action. Get his whole body into it. Different. See here, he's probably looking up on this one. But, you know, I mean, there's so much possibility here. So we've got him going like that. You could try him more like an S curve from this way. Looking up, perhaps. As he's doing this little thing. Now there's all kinds of things you can do in this section here, which is really cool. Just going crazy. You could even have him twist and spin so that he's doing it in reverse. Let's say his head is looking up like this, but his body has twisted and spun around into sort of a corkscrew upon itself. Maybe even down with his legs doing a corkscrew. I don't know. And his little hands are going around in the opposite direction. So he's got this hand here, and this hand is coming out here. So his hands are shorter, but they've gone around himself, kind of thing. And it's part of the game. It's part of his mime fun. So push. You have plenty of place, plenty of room here to push. Let's push it even further. Look at that. Especially with that long neck, you can do all kinds of stuff. Push him. And then do the reverse, right? Bend them in the opposite direction. Get those lines of action going. And they can go anywhere, you know. Sometimes you can have three hands. In this movement, why not have three hands moving at the same time? It's fun. And you got a lot of time there for him to do that sort of thing. And he could hop and be on the reverse side. You could see his nose from behind. His ears down here. So this is his back, right? His jaw is there. His eyes are up here. So now something happens here, and he's actually swallowing the ball. So you would want to have some, maybe he does a pirouette somewhere around here, and he does a funky action, jumping up and landing. Something that's going to sort of confuse the eye, so we're not quite sure what happened, because that's part of the confusion. And then he stops, and I would, maybe you could make it a funny stop, right? So this is I'm just using your pose here. So I would exaggerate it a little bit more. Because he is a mime. He's not quite sure what happened. His hands wide open because we don't want to. He doesn't have it in his hands. We're going to make sure that we know that there's nothing in his hands, which is what you've got. What happened? Now he's going to look up. Line of action. Always maintain nice, fluid line of action. That's spine. And I would say keep his elbow against his body, even though you're keeping that to make it clear that he's looking at his hands. This side he's not looking at yet, so because and make sure that his eyes are always spot on looking at whatever he's looking at. So here he's looking at his hand, and maybe he's going to raise it and wiggle his fingers like he's looking around it. Where's my thing? And pull that elbow away from his body so we know that he's looking at that one, right? And it's not so much of a twin. So now it's got a little more balance there than that. He's looking at that one. And now he's going to look at this one. And so when he looks at that one, it's a nice S-curve you've got insinuated there. So now this one becomes up here, and I'd probably change the posture to help guide the fact that he's finished looking at that one. We don't necessarily want to keep it out as strongly. Yeah, maybe you do. Maybe you do. Maybe he can still be doing something over there. But this one, make sure he's raising it up to look at it. And he's, rolling his fingers through that one. Elbow away from the body. So he's supporting it, and he's looking at it. That's clear. Clear line of action, clear, simple. Because here, like this, you're not quite sure, is he just doing a huh? But you want to look. You can have a huh, and maybe you can go into a huh after that. looking at the audience. So now he's going to look at the audience, but then I would break the formality. I'd keep the formality of the pose still broken. And exaggerate those shoulders going up. And since this one was the last one up, it could still be up just a little bit. I might favor that one up a little bit more and keep this one down a little bit more since it's already been there, just for variety's sake, so it's not so twinny. Now he's going, huh? Okay, so he hasn't. Now he's sort of getting it. It's going to hit in his throat, or I'm not sure if it hits in his throat here or not. But again, it got an interesting problem here because you have this with this. So there's sort of a twin there, and it makes it very zigzaggy. Which actually, how would you make that work? For his neck, because you have this Adam's apple, which tends to be something that is not really it's not a break in the joint of the neck. It's something added to the neck. So I'd always keep the back part of the neck in mind when you're doing your posing, so that remains strong. So is he gonna? If he's going to do that, let's just say he does. I'd push it. Let's see if we can push it. Because he is looking back. Okay, let's just try to work with that. Keep it clear. Again, I would try to avoid the twins. Always try to avoid twins unless there's a really good reason for it. Because sometimes there is a good reason for having twins. You want twins sometimes. But I always feel it's more organic when it's not quite twins, because we're not mechanical creatures. See, even though he's doing the same thing, the fact that this hand is up and this one is lower helps him feel a little less posy. And so then it starts coming out of his throat, bouncing around his throat. He does a reaction, which you can really push to an extreme. This is funny. And here I would just go nuts, because now he's out of control. He's unglued. He's like, I don't know what's going on here. Push that pose, arms up. I wonder if you could do a curlicue. Maybe one could do a curlicue. Because you got sort of a twist, and I would want, that's nice. If you animate that with a twist, like when he goes down into that reaction, that he's actually done a twist. And if that's the case, let's just assume he is doing that twist. So now his whole body is twisted. And I would want his arms to be just as twisted. So let's get his head in here. And then he's got one arm that's sort of twisted over here. Let's see if this works. And then one arm over here that's maybe more snaky. Like it doesn't know where it belongs. Woo, whoop. I don't know. That's kind of funny if it's in the twist. But you can actually move that so that, I've got them left and right. You might want to have one sort of twisting off this way. Let's try it. Do I have a pose I can do that with? Yeah, so let me just add a drawing here. Let's try that. Let's see, because this is fun. So let's say this one, this arm is going off this way, and his hand, I don't know, something like that. And this one, this arm, this way, say if he's doing that twist. Ah, fun. Anyhow, you can have fun with it. Grabs his throat. Again, another extreme pose that you can really push, and I would push it even further. You want to make sure also that you're small enough in here that you have room to do things and go places. Whoops. And I might try to emphasize a squeeze tight, you know. And I would bring those elbows up and loop them out, perhaps, you know, even more. Woo! To help that get more, a little more funny. And so now he's banging himself, trying to get the ball out of his throat, I'm guessing. Yeah. Now you can get real loopy with those hands and the feet, right? So right now what you have is you have his bottom, his head and his rear, his pelvis and his head sort of on the same plane level. I would want to get one lower than the other and really push the spaghettiness of his. And here you're going to have to figure out, because you're sort of forward, you want to disconnect in his body so that we feel like he's going to be hitting his neck. And get those up. If you get that big loop in there, and just keep this loop here with a little sense of his neck so we can feel like he's being grabbed there, right? This is his hand grabbing his neck. This would be funny by looping his feet up, perhaps, when he gets hit, and then wherever he's making contact, you could push even further and put maybe a little curve in there. And then his legs could just go up more loopy. You see, I'm just goofing around here with this kind of spaghetti nature of this guy, because this feels a little tame, and it's probably, I know you're just posing this thing out, but and here he can't get it, and so this is a bit, it's not really giving me a lot of energy, but I like the idea that he's now really struggling. He's desperate. Get those eyes big, those pupils small. Maybe his ears can be up and alert more here. And his neck is going to be more like this, so I would want for his arms to be driving into his. And maybe you could, I don't know, do something a little funny with the legs. Bring it under. Anyhow, now this is funny. So big anticipation, something this big on this kind of a character. Big back. I would push it way back, right? Keep these lines of actions as sweeping as you possibly can with his hands. And his head could be way back here. Maybe his nose is sticking up. Right? That's really big anticipation. And then this is cool. I love this. He's spinning. He's this movement of trying to get this thing down. His arms corkscrew around his body. That's hilarious. That's great. I love it. But keep everything clear. Very nice there. You got the hands. I might just push them out just a little bit more. And maybe, make his head bigger here as if he's coming forward more with that. I don't know. Love it. Just make sure it delivers on the pose that you're setting us up for. That's really going to be cool. And then think about how, since this looks like this is where he spits it out, what is that extreme going to look like, right? So perhaps at extreme, he's going to be even further. His eyes are going to be even bigger. Oops. And let's say his shoulders are there. Maybe this is tighter. Maybe this is even more controlled. And he gets wound up, and his whole body is wound up even more. And his little feet are spinning around like a propeller. And so maybe his hands are like, his fingers are wrapped up in themselves. It's just sticking out. Boink! Boop! Sorry for my sound effects. It helps to do sound effects. I encourage you. You don't feel ashamed to do sound effects. For as many years as I've been doing this, I've been around lots of animators. The great ones do sound effects when they're doing their scenes. All right, so now he's got this out. You're going to want to feel the exhaustion. He's just spent. And his knees, you could even do a little janky thing, like my kids like to say, on his legs. So he's feeling kind of weak. I don't know. Head down. And clear. Make sure that these gestures are clear of one another. These parts of your gestures, so that they're subordinating, right? Because right now, this angle right here is so strong. And these angles are so strong. They're, you got them, and they're sort of twinning. They're sort of the same kind of angles that we're seeing. Got it here. Those kinds of things, even though they're all over the place, natural part of your drawing. But they tend to flatten out your characters, right, when you find those. So that's why. And he's so jelly now. So, I mean, maybe his head at some point might be over here as he's trying to recover. And his arm here. And I wouldn't put any angles in those legs yet. I like what you've got there. And then maybe this one can come up here. I don't know. So he's got one there. I don't know. Just experiment. So now he's coming to the place where he's shooing it away. It looks like the ball's starting to come after him because the ball's not happy. I would exaggerate that back, his bad posture back. I mean, because he's so long and lanky. And you could pull this together so it's more of a mass of a shape. And then he's, get those lines of action in there like he's pulling that away clearly. And I would, instead of doing the same posture, he's got to build to something, right? So by the time he's in this one, so you've stopped like 4 times, you want it to be a little more, maybe he's leaning back a little more, he's more threatened, which would build up, so he's leaning back. Maybe this arm here is sort of up. He's got this hand up because he's feeling a little threatened. And he's trying to gently shoo it away, whatever it is, the ball. So that way you're building to something. You're not just repeating the same thing over and over. There's a build there. And then here, is he just bothered or is he more terrified? So maybe he's a little more terrified. Again, push him over. Maybe he's got this leg up. He's just looking at us in mid-posture. Like he's not sure what to do. But he wants to get out of there. And so then he runs. And then you have him, running. Nice pause there. He stops. Fear. So it's a little tame, the run. I would push it so he's really running. He's really got that leg. I mean, he's booking. I don't know, because he's one of those loopy characters. Real big run. And then when he stops, have some fear. That foot's poised. This one's planted, but he's ready to leap. And he looks back, and he's a bit afraid. He's not completely relaxed. He's ready to pounce again. And then he's, go into something strong here. I mean, this is the end. You don't want it just like oh, no. You want it like, this is a terrifying ball that I've been playing with. So really get up in there. Really push it. Do a Tex Avery. Or his hands up on his head. Yeah, you know, I don't know. Something really extreme. And then he runs off. And he runs off even more. This time when he's running, he's even more. Maybe he's leaning and his legs are really, I don't know, leaning into it. So this is a really cool exercise you've got here, Antonio. I think you're going to do something fantastic here. It's going to greatly improve your ability to animate. It's going to push you. It's not an easy thing to do, but pantomime is at the roots of what we do as animators, and I think this has a lot of potential. So thank you for sharing this with us. We look forward to seeing the finish.